Of course, I work with the museum, and I'm not really sure how I got involved in that because I'm an outdoor person. I like camping and hiking and canoeing and all the outdoor things. But they asked me, I passed by one day when they were working on the building, and they said, would you arrange the displays for us when we get the building fixed? And I said, well, yes, I guess I can do that. And I've been doing it ever since. But for a year, I went back after a year and there wasn't anything to display. And I thought, well, you know, if I'm going to display something, I better go out and find something to do. And that part has been particularly good and a lot of fun to go around and visit the older residents and be able to look in their scrapbooks and look through their picture albums and listen to the stories that they have to tell.
Well, Peggy's got something special tonight, so I'm going to turn the microphone over to Peggy. Harriet, come over here.
Come here, Harriet.
Come on, Harriet.
Okay. Okay, we have a proclamation honoring Harriet Allen Stiles. Whereas Harriet Allen Stiles is being recognized for outstanding services to the Swannanoa Valley, and whereas she has spent countless hours in helping to establish the Swannanoa Valley Museum, and whereas she spends unnumbered hours in the beautification of the Swannanoa Valley, and whereas she has spent her life appreciating and protecting all of God's creatures, even snakes, who appear unappreciative, and whereas she can identify and name the glorious flora and fauna of the valley, and whereas she enjoys the company of many family and friends and entertains often and well at her home, and whereas she is married to the judge, but judges none, and therefore the Board of Directors of the Swannanoa Valley Museum do hereby issue this proclamation to honor and proclaim that Harriet Allen Stiles is named and declared the Queen of the May of the Swannanoa Valley on this 30th day of
Okay.
Well, I certainly couldn't have done all that I have been able to do without the help of my family, and you saw most of them here today helping with the maypole, and with the other people who have worked. I get credit for a lot of the work that other people do for the museum, and but I do appreciate this very much. Thank you.
Did we surprise you? It's hard to pull one over on that lady.
Okay, sweet shrub, a strawberry bush, sweet bubbies. It was a favorite of the early people, and my little girls used to pull those off and put them in the corner of their handkerchiefs, and they could smell it all day at school. It's sweet shrub. So y'all be real, don't step on this, because this is becoming one of the endangered flowers of the area.
Oh, wow.
This one is spring beauty. That one that you see down there is toothwork. It's used to make a compost for a toothache.
What? I'm sorry. The yellow right here?
Right here is round leaf violet.
Okay.
This is an erect trillium, and it will not bend down. It will stand up and open out like this. But it has a yellow center. The one we saw down there had a purple center. But we're talking about right there beside a hellebore plant. There's a leafy stalk coming up. That's going to be a Canada lily. it was open land, very much as I would imagine Cades Cove. There was enough wildlife here, and deer and elk and buffalo, to keep the land trimmed down into an open meadow rather than a dense forest. As Rutherford, 2,000 men came through here, quite a few of them, of course, observed how beautiful the valley was and how lush the vegetation was and how nice the climate was, and the water was so pure, so that after Rutherford went on through and found the Indian villages out toward the Qualla boundary in Waynesville and Franklin, and they burned a lot of the villages out there. They came back through here, and when the United States government opened this land for development for a lot of the men who had fought in the Revolutionary War wanted to get back away from civilization and look for a peaceful place, and they remembered how beautiful the Swannanoa Valley was, and they started to move in. That's when Sam Davidson came first with his family, his wife and baby, and that's a well-known story about Sam being killed by the Indians after he'd gotten his cabin built, and his wife and the servant carried the baby and walked back to Old Fort. And Sam's twin brother, William, came back up here with some friends and found Sam's body and buried it on Jones Mountain. And then the next year, 4 or 5 families came up and started a settlement where the Bee Tree Creek runs into the Swannanoa River. This was the first Swannanoa settlement. Several years later, some of the Burnett's came up and went up through into the North Fork Valley and started a settlement there. The North Fork Valley grew faster than the Swannanoa settlement, and at one time it was such a flourishing community. There were more people in the North Fork community than there were in Asheville. And North Fork continued to be a very flourishing community until the railroad came through. people would like to have, before the railroad, had no way to get their lumber out. And lumber was one of the big industries in the mountains, and they were trying to develop mining, and there was no way to move the products from the mines out except in horse-drawn or mule-drawn wagons, so that the railroad promised quite a bit of good transportation to get goods into the mountains and to get the product of the mountains out into the markets in the Piedmont. They had gotten to Old Fort by the beginning of the Civil War. Then when the Civil War broke out, that put a stop to the building of the railroad. And after the Civil War was over, the state of North Carolina allotted money to continue the railroad on from Old Fort up the mountain. There were some men from up north, which we refer to them as carpetbaggers, came down with big ideas about developing the railroad. The state gave them the money to do it with, and they took off to the west coast with the money, so that it was 4 or 5 years after that before the state could raise enough money to start again. During that time that they were trying to raise the money, there was a very, very dry summer, and the crops failed in the mountain area, and a lot of people nearly starved to death because it was so hard to bring food products up from the Piedmont in just the horse-drawn wagons. And I will say the Presbyterians were very diligent in their effort to educate mountain children. They did a lot of work. They started a lot of schools in this southern Appalachian area, and the farm school was one. And later, the farm school combined with the Asheville Normal School to make a coeducational school out there. And the normal school was on the property where Mission Hospital was, and they combined the two schools. It was a farm school, primarily agriculture, to improve the agricultural practices of the, because they thought if they could teach the children in school better practices, they would take them home, and the families would benefit from that. There were a lot of apple orchards on top of the mountains, and that was done primarily because to keep the frost from killing the fruit, because frost naturally forms in the valleys first and not on the tops of the mountains. And although the trees would bloom later in the year, they would not be subject to frost kill. Then we had Black Mountain College here, and Mr. Rice was teaching at Rollins College in Florida, and he was a very fine man, except he apparently had a personality that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. He was one of these people that was always right, and that annoys particularly the people he was working with. And they tried several times to get him fired from the university, and it would never quite stick. Finally, they put him out, I understand, for leaving dirty dishes in the faculty's house out on one of the islands on the west coast of Florida. But he had left a pile of dirty dishes, and so they said, "This is it." So he left, and 4 or 5 of the professors went with him, and I think about 10 students left also. He was well liked in some circles, and he was hunting for a place to have a school, and apparently his daughter was acquainted with someone at Warren Wilson, and they told her about the Robert E. Lee Hall, said it was only used in the summertime. So she told her father about it, and he came up, and the story goes that he walked up on the porch there at Robert E. Lee Hall and sat down in one of the rocking chairs, and he said, "This is it. This is the place." And so they negotiated with the YMCA, and they used the school in the wintertime. The Robert E. Lee Hall was had a furnace and steam heat so that they could use it in the wintertime, until they decided they didn't want to have to close their school down in the summer and so then they negotiated to buy the property that Lake Eden is on, and moved out there, and then they could have their school 12 months of the year. It was a very fine school in that it had very talented, highly artistic instructors. It came along in the 30s, in the height of the Depression. Hitler had closed the Bauhaus in Germany, and the professors from the Bauhaus who were of Jewish background had to leave the country, and they came to New York, and there was no work for them. It was a very bad time, and Mr. Rice heard about it, and he sent word to them that if they would come down here and teach, that they could bring their family. He would give them a place to stay and enough to eat. He couldn't pay them very much, but then they could teach whatever they wanted to and make their own time. And so 4 or 5 of the families did come down, and they were highly talented. They unfortunately spoke with German accent, and the local people wouldn't have anything to do with them. There was rumblings of war in Europe, and mountain people are naturally suspicious of anybody that's a little different from what they are. And so here in the midst of the Swannanoa Valley was this gem of cultured, artistic people, and the local people wouldn't have anything to do with them, didn't take advantage of any of the fine things that they could have learned from. I can remember going out to Black Mountain College. I was in junior college, which is now Asheville, UNCA, but I was in junior college, and our drama teacher was a friend of Robert Bunch, who was the drama teacher at Black Mountain College. And so when Black Mountain College was putting on a play, Pop would put us all in his car, and we'd go out to Blue Ridge to see their production. And they gave them in the dining room up back of Robert E. Lee Hall, with just blankets or sheets or something strung on a wire across one end of the the dining room. And one time we went, the roof was leaking, it was raining, and they just had big wash tubs sitting around with the chairs in between them, you know. But when the production started, I know we saw the dollhouse, Ibsen's dollhouse there. When they turned the lights off and the stage lights came on, the scenery that they had painted and the production that they put on was so wonderful you forgot about the roof leaking and the curtains on a wire across the end of the dining room. It was just wonderful.